Chapter 6 Homecoming and Preparations. We arrived back home safely with our new friends. Yasmin and Elzazma had wide eyes at all the new sights around them. Our people in turn had wide eyes at the sight of Yasmin and Elzazma. We managed to bring them safely to my home, where I had called ahead to make arrangements for them to stay. Nidara met us at the door, and she and Yasmin became swift friends. Once I had given Yasmin and Elzazma bracelets for translation so that they could speak freely. Interestingly, their names changed when they said them. They became Lilani and Alexander respectively. I would have to ask Loktar to sort that out later. However, for now, that is what they became known as. My son came home a short while later, and was very surprised to see the two new additions to our household. However, once he had gotten over their strange appearance, he and Elzazma became fast friends, playing in the backyard together like they had known each other for years. I was very watchful during this period to make sure that the Tinora had not deceived us and meant to do us harm. However, they were the best guests I had ever entertained, and I could find no fault with them. The news of other sentient life spread swiftly throughout New Atlantis, as the city had become known, and after the second day, I had to erect a barrier of air around our home to keep away all those who only wanted to look at our new friends. Eventually they got the message, and I could lower the barrier, although when I did this, they returned. This prompted Nartinia to create the Tinora Protection Act, which, when it was passed, declared that anyone who made themselves disturb the peace of a Tinora was violating the law and susceptible to a fine. This dramatically decreased the number of press and others around the house, and when we had a public press conference at which Yasmin spoke, the numbers dwindled to almost nothing. I must say, I was very proud of the way that Yasmin handled herself at the time, as she was completely out of her normal life, but had adapted and incorporated to ours splendidly. One of the effects of the conference, though, was that they were now universally known as Lilani and Alexander. I asked her whether she would like this changed, but she said a name is a name, and decided to stay with Lilani for now. It was a week later, and it was time for us to meet with the gathered Tinora leaders. We had sent representatives to Zion, who were due to arrive there shortly. Masake had gone there, along with her husband Mikhail and her son Jamin, and her daughter Kyria. She had brought several Lamonts with her in order to facilitate talks with the Tinora and ourselves. They had decided to create a giant floating platform above the large crevice that we had found when we had gone there. With the help of the study of the rings, our technology had improved greatly in the last year. We were living in what many now called the Age of Splendor, with amazing new inventions coming out almost daily. One such was the compositor, which allowed us to make an image on a screen and print it out into a reality based on a cartridge of compacted atoms we fed into it. This is how, by the end of the week, what was originally going to be a platform turned into a magnificent floating fortress with soaring ramparts and more than adequate meeting hall. It was quite a sight, the shining grey stone of the fortress suspended over the nothingness of the void below. A long bridge was let down from the fort to allow the Tinora leaders aboard. Masake herself provided the charge for the batteries, keeping the fort afloat, although she commissioned giant chains to be constructed around the fort, securing it to the sides of the crevice, should the ring power ever fail her. Nartinia produced a cube from his pocket and threw it to the ground. In an instant, the entire council was put into the hall of the great fortress, in hologram form only, though. For us it appeared as if we had been transported directly there, although we could not interact with anything. Lilani and Alexander rushed forward when they saw Elkanah there, and he rushed forward to greet them, but they simply passed through each other, much to their mutual shock. Once we explained to them what was happening, they were quick to grasp it though, and we all took our seats so that the summit could begin. It was late into the night now, and the meeting had just ended. Masake was to stay there in the fortress, along with a small amount of our population, in order to establish a small human colony there. They would act as the caretakers of the Tinora and help to share with them our technology. The Tinora would in turn send small groups to Mantana, where mine and Nartinia's family were heading in order to set up colonies there. Mikhail had asked to set up in Cunette, which she said she had fallen in love with, and she was granted this. Seth and Matthias were to go to Celsior, which was below the continent of Zaron, and set up a base there for our operations. Loktar would stay here in Soldarium and care for all those who did not wish to leave New Atlantis. We did this in order to ensure that our people would survive any outbreak of disease, and in case the Pohaka were as unreasonable as the Tinora had said, we would not be able to be taken out in one fell swoop. It seemed not long, in fact, under 30 days, until Nartinia and myself, along with our families, and roughly 2 million colonists, had to move to Montana. I took the north of the continent to set up a city in, and Nartinia set up in a desert to the south. The colonists were split roughly in half between our two new cities. I named mine Mantaresh, and Nartinia named his Cerulean. We all built giant structures similar to what Masake had at the center of our cities, although minus the bottomless crevice below, of course. Nartinia was still the emperor of the collected cities, and would be for the foreseeable future, although each ring-bearer was allowed certain freedom in the individual running of their cities. One law was made very clear, that none were to engage the Pohaka until a joint mission could be undertaken. It was another year before all the cities were settled in, and I would often rest and look out of the tallest tower at what Manataresh had become in such a short time. It was a beautiful city, with wide streets and open markets. Farms had sprung up all around the city, and people had begun to domesticate some of the local wildlife. A few horses had been brought from Earth, and they were now installed at stables around the city. Although faster methods of transport were available, it was still pleasant for the people to go horse riding for leisure and sport. My son Liaran had grown even taller, and now stood at equal height to his mother, and his friend Alexander, who had grown as well, yet not as swiftly as Liaran. We had learned from Lalani that the Tenoran lived until they were killed. They were not susceptible to disease, and their bodies did not naturally decay. I did not know whether to be envious of them or pity them. Alexander had a bright mind, and would often come indoors. While my son trained with the sword, he would sit next to me, learning words and figures, and constantly surprising me at the speed at which he picked them up. It was about this time that the boys got themselves into a bit of mischief, with unexpected results. I have the full story here from Alexander, and will present it to you now. Alexander stood looking out at the city that had sprung up around him from almost nothingness. It was amazing how fast these humans could build and create, how quickly they could form things from other things, and how easily they were able to manipulate matter. What had uneased him the most, though, was their ability to be untruthful. He had even caught his dear friend Liaran in a lie or two. It was very unsettling, having lived surrounded by those only able to speak the truth, to now being surrounded by those who could lie. He had decided to accept them for who they were, though, and trust them that they were presenting the truth accurately. Besides, it was easy for him to detect a lie, since although his people could not lie, they could leave out facts, or not explain fully, and he was used to looking for the signs of that happening. Liaran walked in just then, looking worn out from training, interrupting his train of thought. "Hey, Alexander! Come, let's get something to eat," he said, grabbing Alexander's arm. This was another thing that disturbed him about Liaran. Although the boy was so friendly and kind normally, he insisted on training with his sword, which, if he understood correctly, was made with the intention of harming other sentient life. Regardless, he just nodded his head in agreement, and soon both boys were invading Nidara's kitchen to get their lunch. After eating their fill, both boys retired to the room they shared by choice. Alexander had been offered his own room, but had declined, saying that he was not used to being alone, and Liaran had been more than willing to share with the young boy. They sat on their beds, and Alexander asked Liaran, "How does your dad do the things he does? I have seen him do things that none of other of your people do." "It is because of the ring he wears." "The diamond one?" "The same. It makes him super strong, and lets him control the air around him." "That is amazing," Alexander stated in awe. "But what stops others from doing the same?" "Well, Daddy didn't make the rings, although he probably could have if he wanted to, so there are only 10 of them." "I see. I expect the others belong to the heads of the other cities, but there are only 8 cities, and that leaves 2 more rings." "Yep. When Daddy first found them, he had everyone try to see if they could fit, but nobody except them were accepted." "Did you try?" "Yep. Although Daddy warned me not ever to get close to them if I didn't feel okay to pick one up. Some naughty people didn't listen to Daddy and turned into ash." "Wow, those rings sound dangerous." "They are. That's why Daddy keeps the boxes they're in a special room, so that no one can get to them. I can touch the boxes, and Daddy's ring even lets me touch it, so Daddy says that he may give me his ring someday." "That would be a big responsibility." "Yep, but I think that Daddy should keep it always, since it chose him first." "That would seem wisest." With that, they both settled in for sleep, and rested till late in the morning. It was about midday when Alexander was walking down a hall, when he saw a small hand beckoning him around the corner. Upon reaching the corner, he saw that the hand belonged to Liaran, and that he had a finger upon his lips. "Shh! Don't make a sound, but come with me," he whispered softly to the boy. Alexander obliged him, and the two snuck through the halls and were met with a dead end. Liaran reached up and pressed a certain spot on the wall. Suddenly a light sprung around him and disappeared. "That's the scanner to see if I have Daddy's blood or not," Liaran explained to Alexander. The wall disappeared, and in its place were two heavy doors. Liaran extracted a key from his pants pocket and slipped it into the door. Alexander was then met with the sight of the two boxes on a pedestal in the centre of an otherwise empty room. I had given Liaran the key and permission to enter the room, so that in an emergency he could get them to safety, being the only one other than me and Mana Teresh who could touch them. I reasoned that he would be wise enough at this age to use the key only in said emergency. Alexander, meanwhile, was already halfway to the boxes. Seeing this, Liaran rushed forward and grabbed his arms, dragging him backwards. "Hey, I told you, don't touch those, you could die!" Alexander seemed oblivious to Liaran's calls, and tugged forward, almost dragging Liaran along with him. It was at this point that I, alerted by my alarms, showed up on the scene. Liaran saw me and his eyes went wide. I scooped Alexander up into my arms and took him from the room, closing the door behind us. Liaran looked down onto the ground. His expression showed deep embarrassment. "We will talk later, Liaran. First, I must take Alexander to his mother." I transformed and flew down the hall, dropping Alexander off with his mother. I told her briefly what had happened and to watch him carefully, and then I headed back towards my son. I found him in his room, sitting on his bed, looking downcast at the floor. I embraced him, then took his head in my hands and made him look me in the eyes. "You understand you broke my trust, right?" "Yes." "You understand that what you did put not only your own life in danger, but Alexander's as well?" "Yes." "Very well. Now, why did you do it?" I wanted him to see the rings." "Why didn't you ask me?" "I didn't think you would let me." "True. Do you think that I would have a reason for not letting you?" "Yes." "And you did it anyway?" "Yes." "I wouldn't have let you because it's too dangerous, Liaran. Alexander is not a human. His reaction to things and his way of reasoning is different from ours. If he had gotten hurt by one of the boxes, or worse still killed, the responsibility for his death would have been on my hands. The peaceful relations we've had with the Tenora until now could have become strained." "I'm sorry." "Very well. Now let's go fly." I grabbed him in my arms and flew out the window, to an outburst of laughter from him. I gave him an aerial tour of the burgeoning city. It was a few weeks later. I had been sorting through some papers when all of a sudden Liaran burst in holding a piece of paper in his hands. "Look, Dad, look! They are going to be holding a tournament soon." His face was beaming, and I noticed Alexander was close at his heels, although he looked a bit unsure about the whole thing. I had approved the tournament a while back and had been waiting for Liaran to hear about it so that I could see his reaction. The tournament was the main event of the Kutora Festival, which we held once a year back on Earth, but thanks to the great move, last year's had been cancelled. Liaran was especially excited, because this year I had told him that he could bond his own Kutora. "Daddy, could my Kutora fight in the tournament?" "No, my boy, it will still be too weak, but maybe next year." "Is Selenia going to be in it?" "Of course, I couldn't stop him if I wanted." Excuse me, what is this tournament and why is there fighting?" This was from Alexander, who was by now beyond curious. "The tournament is a test of skill for both Kutora and Ona. It allows them to show their bond to one another, and to display all the hard work that goes into raising a Kutora. It takes place in Stardust Stadium, with wide Verticube, so although the battles are real, the hurt from it is not." "I see, and what exactly is a Kutora? I've only ever seen Selenia." "Well, you haven't really been able to leave the castle much, but there are many kinds of Kutora. I've lost count of the exact number, as my cousin Gaius loved creating new variants." A pained expression passed my face. "Uncle Gaius passed away," Liaran explained to Alexander. "I'm sorry if this is a delicate subject." "No, it's fine. Now, where was I? Yes. We created the Kutora by mixing the DNA of other living creatures, bringing forth new forms of life many, many centuries ago. One of those forms of life were the Kutora. There were only a few hundred different types back then, but with careful breeding they are now as diverse as the planets in the sky. From what I have learned of your beliefs, such a thing as manipulating DNA to make things would be frowned upon by your people. Why is this not the case?" "Simple. We don't hold the same beliefs as we did back then. Our new beliefs are a very recent thing, and many important questions are still being argued. For now, we are just trying to do our best to trust in the Lord. As the text says, He works all things for the good of those that love Him." "Dad, could Alexander bond a Kutora too?" asked Liaran. "It depends. Is this something you would like, Alexander? Would it have to fight?" No, people bond Kutora for all sorts of reasons, not just for fighting. Then I would love one. His usually large eyes seemed to grow larger as they shined with excitement. I couldn't help but smile. Very well, I will ask your mum, and if she says yes, then you may. Alexander leapt into the air. I had never seen such a display of emotion from the usually placid boy, and I resolved to see his mother as soon as my day's duties were finished. His mother was surprisingly quick to agree, and a few days later I found myself with 2 super excited young boys under my arms, and 1 thrilled Kutora on my shoulder. We spent the better part of the day walking through the various market stalls that had been set up for the occasion. There were all sorts of trinkets and baubles to collect, and in preparation for the boys getting their own Kutora, collect we did. Eventually I had to send a message back to the palace to come and collect some of the items, as they were getting too numerous for us to carry alone. The main event was of course the tournament, and my first match was that afternoon. Selenia performed beautifully, swooping down on his opponent and scoring the victory in an almost casual fashion. Then came the moment the boys had been waiting for. We entered a tall glass dome building that had been set up to be the Kutora Sanctuary for the duration of the festival. They were each given a small golden hexagonal medal to hold. I looked down at mine with a smile, remembering the day I had first met Selenia. They were taken to a large holding field where there were present a vast number of different Kutora species. A lady in a very formal outfit approached them and began the speech that I had heard and I am sure has been passed down for generations. As soon as you enter this door, you will begin one of the most memorable moments of your life, the choosing of your Kutora. Treated well, your Kutora will become a truly loyal partner and a friend. I will shortly open this door and take you through to the Kutora fields and into the nursery, where you can pick your first Kutora. You are free to choose any of the Kutora there, but remember that Kutora are not animals. They are intelligent and they need to be treated with respect. Remember too, do not force yourself on a Kutora. If you choose it, it does not mean that it will choose you. You are honored to be chosen worthy to hold a Kutora, and honored to have no less than Maximus recommend you for this. So behave well. Having heard this, albeit the last part being a new addition, a bit embarrassing for myself, we headed into the fields and back into the nursery area. Here there was a similar number of Kutora, although they were miniature, still babies. Alexander and Liaran both took their time looking through the Kutora. Eventually, Liaran smiled as he laid his eyes on one that I can only describe as a rock with a grassy patch on top and a small leaf protruding from its head. There is a drawing I did of this creature, and I may put it below for your reference. Immediately, as it saw Liaran, it began to swing this leaf backwards and forwards, almost like a dog wagging its tail. It was most certainly excited, and began letting out a soft mewling sound. Liaran looked up at me and nodded excitedly. I looked at the plaque next to it and read a bit about it. It says that he will grow very large, Liaran. Even though he is small now, he will be very big in the future. Will you still want to take care of it when it's bigger than you? Dad, I will take care of it, I promise. This one, he feels right. Very well then. Hold up your medal and touch it to his head. Liaran did this, and the medal glowed slightly, and the image of the Kutora appeared on it. Good. Now say what you want its name to be. Keldaran, Liaran said boldly. With this, the bonding was complete. As long as Liaran held the medal, he would always know where Keldaran was and what he was feeling. Keldaran picked up a similar medal with his leaf and touched it to Liaran. Now the same would be true for Keldaran. He slipped his medal under a crack in his rocky shell. The doors to the nursery slid open and the lady entered with a little girl under her arms. She looked incredibly shy and reserved, but determined at the same time. I'm sorry to disturb you, Lord Maximus, but this little girl has been endorsed by Nartini himself, and I could not refuse her entry. If it's too much trouble, I can come back later. I'm just so excited. The little girl's face blushed even redder upon saying these words. I smiled as I recognized the little girl. Hello, Kyria. Why are you here alone? Where is your mother? Mother sent me here to stay with you a while, Lord Maximus, sir. She said she had arranged it with Lady Nidara. Oh, really? How did you get here? I would have to talk to Nidara about this. She hadn't said a word to me. My daddy brought me here to the city and left me here with Lady Nidara at the gates. Then Lady Nidara sent me straight here with some guards with this for you. She held out a lamont with one of the buttons glowing slightly. Thank you, Kyria. You know Liaran. Go join him and Alexander and you can pick out your Kutora with them. Thank you, sir, she said, bowing, and walking swiftly away with my son and Alexander to have a look at the other Qutora. I held de Lamont up to my ear and pressed the button. "Greetings, most esteemed Maximus," came the voice of Masake. Almost didn't recognize it, as she was not her usual shy self. "I don't know who else to trust my daughter's safety to at this time. I have had my husband bring Kyria here for your care, as we have picked up large fleets of ships sailing along the sea towards Zion. Upon consultation with the Tinora, we now believe these to be the Pohaka slaving ships. They apparently occasionally come here to capture Tinora and enslave them. The Tinora, being unable to defend themselves, have all been brought into the city for protection. I have sent word to Notinia, and he is on his way, along with the other ring-bearers. Your presence is requested only tomorrow, as Nidara has informed us as to the importance of this day for your family. Please make accommodation for my daughter, as if this were to turn into a battle, I do not want her to witness it. My gratitude as always, Maximus. See you tomorrow." I sighed. The time of peace, it seemed, was drawing to a close.